This is something new for the Redline. 2 cars that don't even have a Redline. In fact, they don't have an engine at all. Well, one of them does, but we'll get to that later. These are 2 electric city car runabouts, or at least that's what they look like. I think they're the coolest car ever made. In fact, I think they're also the best electric car ever made. BMW have recently updated the i3 and they've also added the S, the performance version. But I think this one's a performance version to start with. So let's have a look, shall we? The BMW i3 and i3S.
Yes, there's 2 here, but I promise you, they're different. The i3 just had what BMW calls its LCI, Life Cycle Impulse. That means a general upgrade to boring bits like their headlights, and they're now full LED, and there are some new bumpers, and BMW says the styling is more sophisticated. Next year, there will be a battery with more capacity too. Last year, BMW also told us about the i3S. The Bavarians just couldn't resist it. Fatter tyres, new 20-inch wheels, and the DSC is set up so that you can do skids in it.
You think I'm joking, don't you? Well, I have the press release right here, and I quote, "The availability of dynamic traction control, DTC, throughout the speed range and in corners enhances agility and enables controlled drifts." What a bunch of hoons.
The standard i3 has 125 kilowatts or 170 horsepower, while the i3S has 135 kilowatts, which is 184 horsepower. It's still not a fireball with a 0 to 100 km/h time of 7 seconds to the normal car 7.4, but it feels way quicker. Torque is up by 20 Newton meters, and of course, it's available at 0 revs. Other changes to the S include a wider track, lower suspension, different springs, different dampers, and a sport mode. They both have roughly the same range from the 33 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is just here under the boot floor. This one also has a motorbike engine known as a range extender. It's got a little fuel tank, gets you another 100 k's or about 60 miles, depending on how you drive, of course. I wouldn't get 60 miles out of this. So surely the i3S is the better one to have. It's lower, more powerful. Let's find out, shall we? So I'm really reacquainting myself with this car because I've driven this a number of times. It doesn't matter that this isn't the LCI. The LCI drives pretty much the same in the base car. And this is, of course, the range extender. But the fundamentals are the same. So this car introduced the idea of one pedal operation. And now often those sorts of gimmicks that car companies come up with, they're often a little bit dodgy, but this car you can actually drive on one pedal. So what that means is you'll be driving along, you'll see a stop sign, you just lift off, and the regenerative braking means that you slow to a halt without any drama at all. It's just simple, straightforward. Like, I've not used the brakes, I've come to a give way sign, done. So, turn the wheel, and we're off again. So the only complaint I've really had about this car is it's got a kind of slightly choppy ride. It's not fidgety in the sense that, or choppy in the sense that while you're driving along, you know, like maybe a Fiat 500. It's not choppy like that. It's just a little bit inconsistent in the way it kind of rolls when you're in a corner. It's nothing bad, and you totally get used to it in 15 seconds flat. It feels odd. It's just unusual. That's probably the most unusual thing about this car is the way it rides. Around town, it's really, really good. It's really quiet. But what I like about it, and what you're interested in, because you don't care about, you know, if it's easy to park or not, you're not here for that. What you want to know is it fast? And it is, because you've got that instant torque. You just boost, whoop, and off you go, and it pushes you back in your chair. And it's really quite something. Because the numbers don't sound that impressive on this car, do they? I mean, 100 and something kilowatts. I mean, most hatches have that now. But because of the electric pickup from zero, I mean, all the power's there from zero. You don't have to wait for it to wind up because it's all there all the time. it's a really different feeling car to drive. Now in this car you don't have a sport mode, that's reserved for the S, which is a little bit disappointing, but what are you going to do? But I do like the way this handles. It handles really well. It's a lot of fun. You read on the internet these drop kicks, you say, oh, it understeers, but I'm going to be frank here. If you make this car understeer, you're driving like an idiot. Because any car is going to understeer if you pile into a corner too hard. I think people get a little bit confident about how this car handles and just start chucking it around like it's on 205s, which it clearly isn't. These tyres are what we call in the business cheese cutters. They're very narrow. What's amazing about the car though is how much grip is available from those skinny tyres. They are super skinny. They're really tall, but they're super skinny. And I think that's extraordinary. Part of that's down to all the weight being down really low. I mean, this isn't a light car. It's about 1,350 kilos. So it's, you know, it's one of those cars that there's a lot of weight saving material in it, all the carbon fiber and all of that, but it's 1,350 kilos, but it still moves. Like it's creeping towards sort of Fiesta ST type 0 to 100, which is about 7.4 seconds, and it's just point and go. And I love the rear wheel drive on this. The rear wheel drive is just, it's so cool. I love that this is rear wheel drive. That really makes it BMW for me, and BMWs are such lovely cars to drive as a rule, and I've been a vigorous defender of this car from the day it was born. I really like it, and since I first drove it I was hooked. And from the first drive it also made me realise that electric cars don't have to suck, because when this first came out electric cars were a bit dull or hugely expensive like a Tesla. So the range extender, it's just a little motor popped into the back. Very discreet, you don't even know it's there. There's not even a badge on it. All it does is add to the range of the car. It doesn't do anything extraordinary to the performance. In fact, it doesn't do any of the performance. It just gives you another 100 Ks or about 60 miles. And the way it does that is when you run out of juice, it fires up, it purrs. It actually purrs in the back. You can barely hear it. So it's seamless, it just comes on and off you go. The other thing you can get it to do is get it to hold the battery charge. So you can't do it if your battery's got over 75% of charge. And I think I know what that might be, but it's boring physics and I won't bore you with it. But it lets you under 75%, so anywhere under there, you can hit the button in the iDrive and it will hold the battery at that charge by just feeding the electricity through into the battery and then into the motor. Again, little purring engine, just helping you out. So, normal i3, pretty good out of the box, handles well, rides well, super quiet, it's fun, I really like it. Let's have a lash in the quick one. So, quick recap. The i3S has a little bit more power. Nothing about this it's not like an MI3, which sounds like an intelligence agency. There's nothing hugely different. The tyres are only 20 millimeters wider. They're still Bridgestone Ecopias, so there's, you know, it's not like they've suddenly slapped a set of Pirelli P0s on it, for instance, or Conti Sports or whatever. So there's only a small bit of power and a small bit of extra torque, probably about 20 Newton meters. There is a new set of springs and dampers, obviously, because the suspension is 10 millimeters lower, which again is not a lot. You've also got to remember that 10 mils is going to make a bigger difference in this car than most cars, because all the weight is underneath your feet, because there's really very little weight above basically your hip line, because the battery pack and the motor are all in the back and they're all set as low as possible. The way it handles the corners, you can go through quite a bit quicker, and it really does respond very well to the throttle. Like it changes direction really well. Because it's rear wheel drive, it's a proper BMW. I mean, I think people forget that. It's not an Eco Special, you know? It still has a lot of the BMW DNA in it, again, like the standard i3. So in Australia particularly, and we've got a problem here in Australia in that we don't really have a comprehensive charging network at all. And couple that with the low range of this car, which hopefully is something that BMW are going to sort out in the future. Coupled with the low range of this car, that does make things a little difficult. And you know, city cars can be sporty. There's no reason why you have to turn up your nose at city cars. I actually really like driving 1 litre 3-cylinder city cars around, and it's particularly if they've got a little bit of fun in the suspension. Like the local Kia Picanto in Australia has its own Australian steering and suspension tune, and it's terrific. Yeah, it's slow, but it's terrific. Whereas this isn't slow at all. It's quick. It's 7 seconds to 100. That is not mucking around. I like the quirkiness of this, but of course, quirkiness doesn't cut it on the Redline. There are plenty of quirky cars, but as much as I love the Citroen Cactus, it's not a Redline car. As much as I love, I don't know, the Peugeot 2008, very quirky car, or the Citroen DS4, very quirky car. It's not a Redline car, but this is a Redline car because of the way it performs. It really does perform. There's no compromise to the performance, and there's no thought that you can't have any fun in this. It is such a fun car. It's fun to look at. People wave at you in this car. I quite like that. That's a lot of fun. I mean, here in Australia, they are very expensive, and I think that's the same anywhere in the world. They're quite expensive, but you are getting, I mean, this is pretty much a hand-built car, and I'd be very surprised if BMW makes any money at all on this car. But it's a brilliant rolling lab. You know, the iX3 is coming, and that's got the gear, that's got more range, denser batteries, and I'm hoping that the i3 lives on and gets those upgrades as its life continues. I mean, I think this car could be on sale for the next 10 years. It really is that good. Apart from the slightly odd ride, and that's a function of how stiff the chassis is and the narrow, tall tyres and all of that, that's it, you know. And if BMW could just sort the range out, I'd have one of these. I would have one of these in a heartbeat. My whole family loves it. Everyone I know thinks they're cool. And this is probably one of the coolest cars BMW makes, and one of the coolest cars ever made. It is cool. It's not pretty. No, it's not pretty. And I'm normally not a fan of electric cars that look stupid to announce to the world that they're electric cars, but it's definitely telling you about its function. And in the S, you've got a bit of a sleeper. No one's going to know how quick this is unless they know they're i3s, and not many people do. Just really, this car puts a smile on my face every time I see one, every time I drive one, and I've driven a few of them. Yeah. But the S is good. The S is really good. It is worth the extra. Absolutely worth the extra.